What does it mean for us to be our authentic selves? What does it mean for our church to be our authentic selves as a Unitarian Universalist Church of Jacksonville? When people come here, and we have some new members and some returning members, what do they see? What do they feel? What is the energy? How does our authentic self, both individually and as a collective body, navigate in the world? What does the landscape around us look like? For some of us, it may be very life-giving. There may be a sufficient amount of challenges that keep us intellectually and emotionally stimulated. But for others of us, the world may be negative, and it may be very overwhelming. And for many of us, it's both. What do we do to change our landscape? Or perhaps accept the landscape and change our attitude toward it? And what is our internal landscape telling us? For those of us who are younger, are we dwelling in what could be the unknown future instead of living in the present moment? And I don't mean that we don't plan for the future. If we're going to school or working in our career, working on a family, maybe having a partner, those are all things that we're working on. But are we doing that in anxiety and stress at the expense of actually living an intentional, peaceful life at the moment, even as we plan? For those of us that are older, and there's a few of us, do we live with regrets? Do we feel less of a person because we can't do what we used to be able to do in the past? Is our energy lower, and does that bother us? Are we forgetting that we too have a future? And that the adventure of living out these upcoming days, months, and years is a blessing that we know not everybody has. It is the unknown of a future that can make us be stressful and cause anxiety. After all, aging makes us more dependent on others. And for Unitarian Universalists that tend to be independent, we don't like that. So whether we're young or old, we tend to be very self-sufficient. But I will tell you, if for that reason alone, living becomes more meaningful, because not only for you, but those around you that want to be supportive, those that you perhaps were a caregiver or a supporter for in the past, now welcome the opportunity to be in that role for you. One thing we know about change, as the Stoics tell us, it is the constant in our lives. For me, today marks the conclusion of my first year with the congregation as your lay minister. It's not a full year. I started on November 1st, although Terry got a sermon out of me in October. So during this time, I've been intentional about 4 things regarding our services. You might have noticed, maybe not. First, directing my sermons to be uplifting, forthright, provocative, intellectually and emotionally stimulating, and enjoyable, all at the same time, in order to help us to grow as Unitarian Universalists. We are a faith community that has important values that we want to make sure we share every Sunday. Second, to engage our members as well as community leaders to participate in our services. I am just one among us. We all have gifts, messages, music, poems, and more to share. From Sean last week to Karen Kempf earlier this month, Mayor Donna Deegan, to all of our speakers, worship associates, musicians, Crystal, and so many more members and staff that make our services possible. Many of our services were memorable to me this past year. And one that stood out that I wanted to mention was Poetry Sunday that we did with the women that shared their own poignant poems, courageously read by themselves to us. All of our guest speakers were wonderful and impactful. Third, facing the headwinds of Florida and our nation, where democracy, freedom, and liberty are all at serious risk. Without being overly alarmist or emotional, jumping up and down on the pulpit, which is not my authentic self, I wanted to make sure that we are aware of what's going on and that we do our part to promote justice in our community, state, and the world. The very values that we hold in our community regarding Black history, regarding pride and rights for transgender children and parents, these are being attacked. And these values are values that are important to us and that we're allies with. The very foundations of democracy are being challenged by extremists who have become more mainstream. It is perhaps the most serious issue facing us as a community. And I include our environment and global warming, since our state now has included that as one of the taboo subjects as leaders stick their head in the sand, causing irreparable harm to each of us. Fourth, being intentional about supporting our own members, from celebrating our new and returning members, expressing our joys and sorrows every Sunday, to supporting our service auction, to having fun activities during and outside of services. Well, our social hall has been beginning under renovation, hopefully permits, but has been off limits. Sue Fry and our committee in social have done an amazing job of making us feel comfortable every Sunday. And I say, Sue, raise your hand for a second. Everybody sees. I know you don't want to raise your hand. She doesn't want any thanks. But in a seamless manner, it just happens. And it doesn't happen easily. We know that. I want to know that this also includes my support of our board. As an ex officio member, who along with many leaders do an amazing job as volunteers side by side with our amazing staff to keep the church operating and growing. What I know is that if we take care of ourselves, we will be able to, help take care of the world. If we don't take care of ourselves, there's not going to be anybody here to help take care of the world. We need the internal support to do that, and I've tried to do that in embracing these 4 areas through compelling and forthright sermons that share my concern and my love for each of you, as well as our community and the world, and to evoke your response, again, without trying to do it in an over-the-top crazy way, but I think from what people have told me, my point gets across. And that is my authentic self, to be authentic with you, to make sure that we are knowledgeable and not only informative, but willing to take action on what will make our community better and our world better. I have felt the love of each of you and your support. I appreciate constructive criticism, helps me to be a better person and a more effective lay leader. I want to express a special thanks to my minister support group, David Sykin, Kristen Lipinski, and Terry Mitchell, who helped me to be the best person and minister I can be. What we do as a community going forward will be first and foremost what is best for us. In light of the changes at the Unitarian Universalist Association level, even though we don't have the final vote for Article 2, I had already written my sermon before then because I knew what I was going to say. And the important thing is, we as a community don't make impulsive or reactive decisions. There will be no immediate changes to our governance structure or practices, our theological core, being the 7 principles and 6 sources, or our mission. In our approach to addressing the outcome, no matter what the vote is, our congregation will continue to use the democratic and collaborative process, educate ourselves with the options, with the support of our board, in the Article 2 Review Task Force and look at options for what serves us best in Jacksonville. Change is change. Not good, not bad, but it gives us an opportunity, and I appreciate those, specifically Tom Larson and Lynn Shad, for helping us make important decisions that we've needed to be proactive in reviewing how we manage our funds, where our foundation is, what we're doing in our own policies and procedures to make sure that we remain true to ourselves as a congregation that is an independent congregation. So what happened is, in the sense of perhaps some conflict, we're actually taking the opportunity to see what we can do better for ourselves. We chart our own path. Does that sound familiar to everybody? Our paths don't always agree. And I will tell you that the important thing to know is that differences of opinion are what's important to be shared, because it is our value and respect for one another to work through and to come with the best decision we can for our congregation. As an independent congregation, we are responsible financially, ethically, spiritually, and morally for our well-being and the well-being of future generations. Some of our new guests may be among that future generation, and we want to make sure that this is always the safe place of a welcoming, open-minded, democratic, Unitarian Universalist community on the First Coast. I personally joined this church, well, because of Lynn Shad, but who invited me, and I'd been here a couple times, and the people who I have met who live out these principles in their daily lives. Now, changes can be good for us. We don't always believe that, I get it, but changes can be good for us. And as Lynn and Brian Paradise leave, change is change. We just wanted to remind you that January and February are very nice months in Jacksonville, and less so in New Hampshire. So feel free to come back. We have plenty of rooms, okay? When I look at our changes, I look at roots and wings. We stay true to our history and our values, and we move forward. And that's what we will do. That's a paradox that we will hold in our hearts. As I go back to the Stoics, change isn't good, the status quo isn't bad, they just are. Even though events are objective, it's our opinion that says something is good or bad, and thus worth fighting for or against. A better attitude is to make the most of everything, and I think that's what we are going to do as our association. And we will see new opportunities for ourselves. We will open our minds to new possibilities, and we will open our hearts to make the most of everything.